Tonight, I'm not standing here as someone who has life figured out. I'm standing here as someone who was once completely lost. There was a time when silence felt louder than noise, when nights felt longer than they should, and when the future looked like an empty road with no lights ahead. I smiled in public, I laughed in conversations, but deep down, I was surviving, not living. And then something changed, not overnight, not with fireworks or dramatic music. It was quieter than that, softer, real. It was the idea of you. My future wife, the woman I hadn't even met yet, somehow became the reason I started believing that life still had chapters left for me. The reason I started fixing the parts of myself I used to ignore. The reason I chose growth over giving up. You didn't know me. You weren't there physically. But the hope of you saved me. Because loving someone you haven't met yet is a strange kind of faith. It's waking up every day and deciding to become the man she deserves before you even know her name. This speech isn't about romance, it's about redemption. It's about becoming. It's about how the thought of one person can pull you out of darkness and teach you how to live again. Future wife, you saved me. And tonight, this is where that story begins. I used to think survival was the same thing as living. I used to wake up in the morning and move through the day like a shadow passing through rooms that never really felt like mine. I spoke, I worked, I laughed when it was expected, but inside there was a quiet distance between who I was and who I wanted to be. The world felt loud and empty at the same time. Crowded streets, glowing screens, endless conversations, yet a silence lived inside me that no noise could reach. I didn't know what I was missing. I just knew something was missing. There is a special kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from feeling like your life hasn't started yet. Like you're waiting in the lobby of your own story while everyone else has already taken the elevator upstairs. I watched people fall in love, build futures, create families, talk about dreams with certainty in their eyes. And I wondered if maybe that kind of life simply wasn't written for me. Maybe some people were meant to exist quietly in the background, like soft music in a scene that no one remembers. I carried doubts like invisible weight, doubts about my worth, doubts about my direction, doubts about whether I was capable of becoming the person I secretly hoped to be. And over time, doubt becomes habit. It becomes the voice that greets you before your alarm clock. It becomes the whisper that follows you into every decision. It becomes the lens through which you see the future, turning every possibility into a question mark. There were nights when the darkness felt honest, nights when the world slowed down enough for my thoughts to catch up with me. In those quiet hours, I asked myself questions without answers. Who am I becoming? What am I moving toward? Why does everything feel unfinished? The ceiling above me became a canvas for unfinished dreams and imagined conversations that never happened. I learned how long a night could feel when hope stayed asleep, and then slowly, quietly, without permission or announcement, a thought began to grow inside me. Not a memory, not a person, just an idea. The idea that somewhere in the future, there was someone whose existence would make sense of all this waiting. Someone who would walk into my life and make the chaos feel like preparation instead of confusion. Someone who would turn the silence into something warm. It wasn't a dramatic moment. There were no signs in the sky and no music swelling in the background. Just a simple realization that maybe the story wasn't empty. Maybe it was unfinished. And unfinished stories are not tragedies, they are promises. I started to imagine the life we would share. Not perfect, not cinematic, not free of challenges. Real, honest. A life made of small mornings and quiet evenings. Coffee cups left on tables. Shoes by the door. Shared laughter that echoes through rooms filled with ordinary light. A life where someone looks at me, not as a project to fix, but as a person to grow beside. And something inside me shifted. The future stopped looking like an empty road and started looking like a destination I hadn't reached yet. The distance between who I was and who I wanted to be suddenly had a reason. I wasn't just walking aimlessly anymore. I was walking toward her. It's strange how powerful hope can be when it has a face you haven't seen yet, when it has a presence you haven't felt yet. Loving someone you haven't met sounds impossible until you realize you're not loving a person. You're loving the life you'll build together. You're loving the version of yourself that will exist when your paths finally cross. I began to change in quiet ways, not for applause, not for approval, not because anyone was watching, because somewhere in the future, someone would rely on the man I was becoming. Someone would trust me with her heart, and I wanted to be ready. Growth stopped feeling like punishment and started feeling like preparation. Every lesson felt purposeful. Every mistake felt like a step forward instead of a step back. I stopped asking why life was hard and started asking what it was teaching me. Pain stopped feeling like an enemy and started feeling like a teacher with difficult methods and honest intentions. I started paying attention to the way I treated myself, the way I spoke to myself in moments of failure, the way I handled disappointment. Because one day, the way I treat myself will shape the way I treat her. And she deserves a man who understands kindness, patience, and responsibility long before he learns her favorite color or the sound of her laugh. The idea of you made me braver. It made me kinder. It made me more patient with the process of becoming. Because love isn't just about finding the right person, it's about becoming the right person. It's about building a life strong enough to welcome someone else into it. I stopped rushing. I stopped comparing. I stopped measuring my progress against timelines that were never mine to begin with. Because our story would begin exactly when it was meant to. Not earlier, not later. Exactly when the version of me you deserve finally existed. There were still hard days, still moments of doubt, still nights when the silence felt heavy. But they felt different now, because they were no longer empty. They were temporary. They were chapters, not the entire book. Hope has a quiet way of changing the atmosphere of your life. The same streets feel different when you believe you're walking towards something instead of wandering. The same sunrise feels warmer when you imagine someone watching it with you someday. The same struggles feel lighter when you believe they are shaping the man someone will one day call home. I started taking care of the little things, my habits, my health, my mindset, not out of fear, but out of love. Because one day, I won't be living just for myself. One day, someone will share my mornings, my worries, my victories, my failures. And I want her to meet a man who has learned how to stand on his own before he asks someone to stand beside him. The thought of you turned responsibility into motivation. It turned discipline into a love story that hasn't even started yet. I began to see the beauty in becoming, the beauty in slow progress, the beauty in imperfect growth, because perfection is not what builds a strong love. Effort does, consistency does, the willingness to keep moving forward even when progress feels invisible does. I imagine the day we meet, the ordinary magic of it, the way it will probably feel simple and overwhelming at the same time, the way life will continue around us as if nothing has changed, even though everything will have changed. I imagine the conversations, the laughter that arrives without warning, the comfort of silence that doesn't need to be filled, the quiet understanding that grows between two people who feel like home to each other. And every time I imagine that moment, I feel grateful for the journey that led me there, grateful for the struggles that shaped me, grateful for the waiting that strengthened me, grateful for the growth that prepared me. Because without the darkness, I would never have learned how to appreciate the light. Without the loneliness, I would never have understood the value of companionship. Without the confusion, I would never have discovered direction. You became the reason I stopped giving up on tomorrow, the reason I started believing in the idea that life could surprise me in beautiful ways, the reason I started treating my future like something worth protecting. I began to notice the world differently, the way couples walk together without speaking, the way hands find each other naturally in crowded places, the way small gestures carry enormous meaning. These moments stopped feeling distant and started feeling like glimpses of a future, waiting patiently. The idea of you gave my dreams direction. It gave my efforts purpose. It gave my life a sense of movement that had been missing for so long. I started to forgive myself for the past foe, find the mistakes, for the delays, for the chapters that didn't turn out the way I expected. Because they were not failures, they were preparation. And preparation is a form of love. Every time I chose growth over comfort, I was loving you. Every time I chose patience over frustration, I was loving you. Every time I chose hope over doubt, I was loving you. Even before we meet, you have changed the way I live, the way I think, the way I see the future. You turned uncertainty into anticipation. You turned waiting into becoming. I don't know your name. I don't know your voice. I don't know the details of your story. But I know this: the life we will build together is already shaping the man I am today. You taught me that love can exist before introduction, that connection can exist before conversation, that purpose can exist before arrival. And because of that, I am no longer standing still. I am moving forward with intention, with patience, with faith in a story that hasn't revealed its most important chapter yet. Every step I take now feels meaningful. Every lesson feels valuable. Every day feels like progress instead of repetition. You gave my future a heartbeat long before you became part of my present. You made me believe in the possibility of a life filled with shared dreams and shared strength. You made me believe that the best chapters of my story are still waiting to be written. You made me believe that love is not something you stumble into, it is something you grow toward. And so I keep growing, quietly, consistently, imperfectly, moving forward with the certainty that somewhere ahead, our paths are moving closer to the same point in time. The distance between us is not empty. It is filled with preparation, with growth, with becoming, with the invisible work of two lives moving toward the same future without knowing it yet. Every sunrise feels like a step closer. Every lesson feels like a piece of the foundation we will stand on together. Every challenge feels like training for the life we will build side by side. You are the reason my story feels alive again, the reason my future feels real again, the reason the silence feels hopeful instead of heavy. You turned survival into living. You turned waiting into becoming. You turned uncertainty into faith. Hope didn't arrive in my life as a loud announcement. It didn't knock on the door and ask permission to come in. It slipped in quietly, like sunlight through curtains you forgot to close. For a long time, I didn't even notice it was there. I just felt the air inside me change. The weight I carried every day began to feel lighter, and I couldn't explain why. Nothing around me had changed, yet everything inside me had started to shift. Before hope found me, I believed the future was something distant and uncertain. It felt like a place other people reached while I remained in the same chapter, rereading the same pages, repeating the same doubts. I watched life move forward from a distance, convinced that maybe forward wasn't a direction meant for me. I learned how to exist without expecting anything extraordinary. I learned how to expect less from life so disappointment would hurt less when it arrived. But hope is stubborn. It refuses to stay quiet forever. It finds cracks in the walls you build and grows through them slowly, patiently, until you can no longer ignore the light. The idea of you became that light. Not a memory, not a face, not a voice, but a promise. A possibility that somewhere ahead, life was preparing something beautiful I couldn't see yet. I didn't fall in love with a person. I fell in love with a future. A future where two lives meet and create something stronger than either one could build alone. A future where ordinary days become meaningful simply because they are shared. A future where silence becomes comfortable instead of heavy. There is something powerful about believing in a love you haven't met yet. It transforms the way you move through the world. It changes the way you treat time. Suddenly, time is no longer something you endure. It becomes something you invest in. Every day becomes an opportunity to prepare for a moment you cannot predict, but deeply believe in. I began to see life as training instead of testing. Every challenge stopped feeling like punishment and started feeling like preparation. Every setback became a lesson that would one day help me protect what we build together. Every mistake became a reminder that growth is not linear, but it is always possible. I stopped running from responsibility and started welcoming it. Responsibility stopped feeling like pressure and started feeling like purpose. Because one day, my decisions will affect more than just me. One day, someone will trust me with her dreams, her fears, her hopes, and her heart. And that kind of trust deserves a man who has learned how to carry weight with strength and grace. The thought of you taught me patience, real patience. The kind that doesn't demand instant results or immediate rewards, the kind that understands that the most meaningful things in life take time to grow, like roots beneath the surface, invisible but essential, like seasons that change slowly but inevitably. I learned how to slow down, how to stop rushing toward milestones that meant nothing to my soul, how to stop comparing my timeline to timelines that were never meant for me. Because our story would begin at the exact moment both of us were ready, even if we didn't know we were preparing for each other. There were days when doubt still whispered in the background. Doubt never disappears completely. It just loses its authority when hope becomes louder. And every time doubt asked me if the future would ever change, hope answered with quiet confidence. Keep moving forward. I started building a life that felt stable, not perfect. Peaceful, not flawless. Real, not performative. Because love doesn't need perfection to survive. It needs honesty, it needs consistency, it needs effort, repeated quietly over time. I started paying attention to the small details of my life, the routines, the habits, the way I spent my mornings, the way I ended my nights. Because love lives in small details. It lives in shared breakfasts, in late night conversations, in the quiet comfort of knowing someone is beside you without needing words. I imagined a home we would create, not a place defined by walls or furniture, but by feeling. A place where laughter echoes in hallways and silence feels safe instead of empty. A place where bad days are softened by presence and good days are multiplied by sharing them. The idea of that home became a compass. It guided my decisions. It influenced my priorities. It reminded me that every choice I make today is shaping the life we will step into tomorrow. I began to take better care of my mind, my thoughts, my reactions. Because love deserves emotional safety as much as it deserves physical presence. It deserves patience during difficult conversations and kindness during stressful moments. It deserves understanding when life becomes complicated. I realize that loving you in the future means respecting you in the present, even before we meet, even before we speak. Every step I take toward becoming calmer, stronger, kinder, more disciplined is a step toward loving you better when our paths finally cross. Hope made me believe in growth without pressure, in progress without perfection, in movement without urgency. It taught me that becoming is not a race, it is a journey shaped by intention and consistency. I began to appreciate the beauty of slow transformation, the quiet satisfaction of small improvements, the subtle confidence that grows when you know you are becoming someone your future deserves. I stopped asking when our story would begin and started focusing on who I would be when it does. Because timing is not something we control, but preparation is something we choose every day. I imagine the moment we meet, not dramatic, not cinematic, just real. A moment that feels ordinary to the world but extraordinary to us. A moment that makes the past feel purposeful and the future feel closer. And in that imagined moment, I see gratitude. Gratitude for the waiting, gratitude for the growth, gratitude for the lessons that shaped us individually before bringing us together. You became the reason I stopped fearing the future. The reason uncertainty stopped feeling like danger and started feeling like possibility. The reason I started trusting the process of becoming instead of resisting it. Hope is not loud, it doesn't demand attention. It simply changes the direction of your steps until one day you realize you are walking towards something instead of away from everything. I started to notice beauty in ordinary days, sunlight on quiet mornings, the rhythm of daily routines, the peace of evenings spent reflecting instead of worrying. Because I knew these ordinary days were the foundation of an extraordinary future, I began to believe that love is not an event. It is a life, a series of moments connected by intention, trust, and effort.